What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the MulletCast, the podcast where business and pleasure collide. My name is Evan Balmer.
Good morning, Evan. What's going on?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I figured I'd switch it up today.
That's right.
It's Mike Mercia. How's everyone doing?
What's happening? Once again, we are joined by Henry Vaccaro Sr. Henry is the owner of Vaccaro Construction and Demolition. Henry, welcome back to the MulletCast.
Glad to be back. Thanks
for joining us again. We talked so much last time that we ran out of time and asked you to come back, which you kindly did. We didn't even realize last time, and I forgot to mention that Henry's also the author of Johnny Cash is a Friend of Mine. Just by sheer coincidence, the last time we were together was actually Johnny Cash's birthday, which is pretty amazing.
That's cool. Weird.
Right. Yeah, and yesterday was my friend Bob Wooten's birthday. He
really?
passed away a year and a half ago.
All right. So where we kind of left off last time, we had talked about we'd gotten to the success of Kramer Guitars, and Eddie Van Halen was on board as a sponsor, or sponsee, I guess, and Endorsee. Right, exactly. And then you had opened the newly refurbished Berkeley Carteret Hotel in Asbury, and Johnny Cash was there on hand and performed at the Paramount.
Yeah, to coincide with the grand reopening of the hotel, Johnny did a concert at the Paramount Theater, and pretty incredible.
Right. Which is pretty amazing to look back on some of those photos of the grand reopening and seeing Johnny there. It's like interesting that Johnny Cash became a part of the rebirth of Asbury Park, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. On stage, June gets up and she talks about how she met me. And, she said, well, when I first met Henry, with this little Virginia twang,
right.
He used to bring guitars to Bob. I thought that's what he did. He was making guitars. Then I found out he was a builder, and he restored his whole hotel. He says, that's how we met him.
Right.
I used to say, let him in. He probably can't afford a ticket. It was funny. So for the first several years, they thought I was in the guitar business.
Right. That is interesting. Which you were. I mean, you...
Well, that was really a silent. I was an investor in the company.
Right.
I didn't take an active role in the day-to-day management. I had my own construction business statewide, and that's what took the most of my focus.
So it was a business opportunity. So at some point, your investment in Kramer does become very successful, and at some point the Jackson family gets involved with Kramer. How does that come about exactly?
That's a sad story.
Right.
Okay, what happened was Kramer grew. You could call it uncontrolled growth. The only money in the company was mine.
Right.
And for the first several years, we're losing money, I'm borrowing money, and it was so bad at one point in time. This is, I would say in the late 70s, maybe early 80s, probably early 80s. I don't know if anybody recalls, but the interest rate was sky high. I think the prime rate was up to 10 or 12%, and we had to factor our receivables, which meant on Friday we took an invoice to the bank and they loaned you money on the receivables. And,
right.
We're paying like 18% interest. Well, what happened was I'm pushing Peter LaPlaca, who was the director of marketing for the company, to get sales. And to appease me, come to find out they're sending guitars out to people that didn't buy them. You take the invoice to the bank, and on Friday they're paying you.
Right.
And then 60 days later, you got to make that up by sending out more guitars. But anyway, we got over that hump, and gradually the company really started to grow. We had we went from aluminum necks to wood necks because Eddie Van Halen wanted a wood neck, and whatever Eddie wants, Eddie gets. And he endorsed the Floyd Rose tremolo, and the company just really started to grow. It grew to by the late 80s. We did over $14 million in sales, made 80,000 guitars one year.
Wow.
A lot of guitars.
Right. Volume.
Yep.
The only problem was we were importing maybe 4,000 or 5,000 guitars a month from Korea. And in, I don't know whether it was 86, 87, whenever the Olympics were in Korea, there were selective strikes against companies that were involved with the United States.
Right.
And one of the companies that was shut down on and off was a company called Court, which was supplying us with guitars. So we had orders that we couldn't fill, and from 16, 18, whatever the sales number was, and we finally had audited financial statements, we had a positive net worth, and everything is going great, and all of a sudden the bottom dropped out with that.
Right.
And, sales dropped, and we're struggling again. we brought in some new management. In fact, we sold the company, the majority of the company, to an investment group that was headed by a man by the name of, I think his last name was Chambers. I don't recall, but
Right.
anyway, they ran a company and they had no clue what they were doing, and they walked away.
Mm-hmm.
And they walked away, just called the bank up one day and said, "Hey, we're out of here." And who owed the debt? Me. I'm still on a note personally for over $3 million.
Wow.
Went to the bank and I cut a deal and I bought the company back for $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
The bank was Mid-Atlantic, and they gave me 1 year to pay the million interest free. And then at the end, whatever was left on the balance of the note, they would term it out. So the deal I had was, as I sold product, they get 80 cents, I get 20 cents,
Right.
which the 20 cents I could use to run the company, and they start paying it that down at the 80-cent rate.
Right.
Well, the biggest asset of the company at the time was what was called a sub-license to the Floyd Rose Tremolo.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, Kramer, since it had an exclusive license, we sub-licensed other manufacturers. It was good
Gotcha.
and bad.
Right.
The good part was it was bringing in a lot of money to the company. The bad part was you're letting your competition have your secret. You know?
Right.
It's like having the only diesel motor in a truck, and you're letting everybody else borrow it and sell
Right.
it against you.
Right. Right.
Historically, that sub-license brought in about $1 million a year.
Wow.
40% went to Floyd Rose, 40% went to Kramer, 20% went to the patent attorney who would monitor and collect the money. So quarterly, patent attorney would call you up, say, "Here's a check for $100,000, et cetera."
Right.
Okay. Well, the bank, Mid-Atlantic, in its haste to put everything behind them, gave me a bill of sale, gave my company. I formed a new corporation called HVV Corp., which the stockholders were my children, myself. And the bill of sale stated that everything that they had on the lien or the UCC lien on Kramer, they're now transferring to the new company. Well, in the lien, which they filed with the county clerk's office, it included the name, patent, trademark, sublicense, finished goods, unfinished goods, things in transit, anything that the company owned, they had a lien on.
Right.
Okay. One of the things they naturally had the lien on was the income from the sublicense agreement.
Right.
So I bought the company back in maybe December, I want to say around 92. I'm not sure the date, but things are going pretty good. And now it's March, and I know come the 1st of April, we're supposed to get a check from the sublicense. So I called the patent attorney up. I said, "Geez, you think I could get an advance on the royalties?" He said, "What royalties?" I said, "On the Floyd Rose sublicense." "You don't own that anymore." I said, "What are you talking about?" Come to find out, the bank sold it back to Floyd Rose for $250,000 cash.
Wow.
It had 10 years left on a license, which had a no default clause. In other words, all the license did was collect money.
Right.
I mean, you can't default it. I mean, you're doing nothing wrong. You're collecting money.
Right.
So I stopped paying the bank. And they came after me and they sued me, and I quickly put the company in a Chapter 11.
Right.
Okay. Make a long story short, in Chapter 11, things take time. They're not fast.
Right.
So we had hearings on it. The bank sued me, and I prevailed. And the judge ruled that the bank basically committed fraud. And he said, "Mr. Vaccaro, instead of you owing them $1 million, I'm going to reduce it to $250,000, and I'm going to allow you to sue the bank in your personal bankruptcy." At the
Right.
time, I'm also in personal bankruptcy because of their failed redevelopment in Asbury Park.
Right.
Okay. So I never pursued the suit against the bank because I ended up in a Chapter 7. I wouldn't have seen any money anyway, so why waste the money on
Right.
legal fees? So now I'm approached by a man by the name of Robert Petralia, who was formerly a group vice president of Warner Communications. Warner being a big company in New York. They were in motion pictures. They owned a soccer team back then, and I mean, big conglomerate. And he was involved in the entertainment end of the business. And he came to Asbury Park and was hired by my former partner, Joe Carabetta, to set up a new educational entertainment division.
Right.
Now, you have to just go back in time to this time frame of around the early 90s. We had the savings and loan crisis. Nationwide, 1,200 banks failed. 5 banks that we're doing business with failed. Toms River Bank failed. Central Jersey Bank eventually was sold out. Riverside Savings Bank failed. Bank of Boston one of their divisions failed at advanced money on a high rise in Asbury Park, and also some other bank. Okay, so now you have no source of money. Nobody is loaning money at all on any real estate projects. That was taboo, and things kind of fell apart.
Right.
So Petralia and Carabetta got together and they came up with a new concept called educational entertainment. In other words, to get away from the stigma of real estate, meaning housing, they were going to develop three large entertainment pavilions. One was to house the Jackson family,
Right.
which would have had recording studios and all that kind of stuff in there. The other was the Cousteau Society, which had committed, and they were going to do a whole undersea world.
Wow.
And the third one was Ringling Brothers. You associate Ringling Brothers with the circus, but they also had ice capades, and their biggest thing, they came up with a new project called Cosmic Journey. Cosmic Journey would depict man's space flight. They already had a replica of the shuttle built in Florida, and they were looking for a permanent home to house that. So now you got three giant 50 to 60,000 foot pavilions scheduled to be built in the front between Kingsley and Ocean Avenue and Asbury Park.
Right.
To get away from the fact that nobody was loaning money on residential.
Right.
Petralia then went before the city council. They spent a ton of money and had the plans changed to incorporate all these projects. And next thing that happens is Carabetta went bankrupt. It's not left Petralia without a job. Since Petralia had interacted with the Jackson family, who I originally bought to Asbury Park in 1988, I brought Joseph and Catherine Jackson, their attorney and their attorney's wife, to Asbury Park with the interest of getting them involved in the beachfront.
Wow. What was your connection to the Jackson family?
Well, that's crazy, too, because through Kramer, one of our earliest endorsees, believe it or not, was Tito Jackson. And we made Tito a custom Kramer guitar, aluminum neck Kramer guitar.
Right.
The body was white, and in like studded rhinestones was his name, Tito, embossed in the body of the guitar.
Wow.
So that's how we first met.
Have you heard of a guitarist recently named Gary Clark Jr.? I don't know if you know Gary.
He shreds.
Right.
Yeah.
He's probably in his own right as a solo artist, he's very popular, but he's also like the go-to guy that the biggest artists in the world are calling. Like the Rolling Stones will call him in to come play with them and things. But I recently heard an interview with Gary Clark that he said the reason he originally picked up a guitar was Tito Jackson.
Wow, that's
he
interesting.
saw him.
Really?
He saw him on TV, and it clicked for him.
Okay,
So,
Kramer, the entire Jackson Victory Tour, they all played Kramer guitars.
Wow.
And the bassist played a Spectre bass, which we also own the Spectre bass company.
Oh, really?
So that was kind of the connection through them.
Right.
And what's weird is there's a local fellow named Frank Harris, lives here in Eatontown, and he was Joe Jackson's bodyguard.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the blue, in around 1988, a man shows up at my office. This is a funny story. And he's got overalls on. He's working for Joe Green's Texaco station, and he's got grease all over it. And he comes in and he says, I want to talk to Mr. Henry. I said, yes, how can I help you? Would he be interested in me bringing the Jacksons? They want to get involved in Asbury Park. And I'm looking at this guy. I said, get out of here. You know? So I didn't throw him out of the office. I was polite, and, I dismissed him. Well, a week later, he comes back dressed in a suit, and he tells my secretary that it's very important. He talked to Mr. Vaccaro, and she brings me out, and she says, I want you to talk to Joe Jackson. Puts him on the phone, and sure enough, it's Joseph Jackson.
right.
And he said, I heard from Frank, meaning the bodyguard, he says that you're building this big entertainment complex. He says, we want to get involved.
Wow.
Okay, so he said, make arrangements with Frank. We want to come to look at Asbury Park. So I made arrangements with the airfare and bring Mr. and Mrs. Jackson to Asbury Park. Put them up into Berkeley. This is 88, 89 maybe. Toured the Kramer Guitar Factory. Then Kramer had a limousine, took them all around the area. And next thing I know, I get a letter from Joseph Jackson. He says the family wants to get involved in Asbury Park. Well, at that point in time, my partner had bought my brother and myself out. That's another tragedy. We got bought out for $9 million, $1 million a year for 9 years. We figured we're set for life. The notes ended up being worthless because Carabetta went bankrupt.
Right.
And but that's you got to roll with the punch. So now, with him being in bankruptcy, he lays off Petralia. Petralia then reached out for the Jacksons, and he decided that he could help them and set up their own company patterned after Warner Communications, and the name of the company was Jackson Communications, formed in the state of Delaware.
Right.
And the stockholders, on the surface, it was perfect. 11 stockholders initially, Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, and all the brothers and sisters,
Right.
all equal stockholders. And the bylaws meant that no one family member could own more than the other. In other words, Michael couldn't own more than Randy,
Right.
and LaToya couldn't own more than Jermaine. And it was to perpetuate the family and to keep them together. On the
Right.
surface, it was perfect, but as we know, it didn't go anywhere.
Right.
So I was introduced to that concept. In fact, I even have the original draft of the bylaws that he sent out and got approved by Mr. and Mrs. Jackson.
Right.
The company is now set up, and the first acquisition, they want to acquire Kramer Guitar Company out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Right.
They made a proposal. It was accepted by the court that they're going to fund a plan of reorganization. And at this point in time, I had already won in court where the amount that was owed to the bank was reduced to $250,000. So
Right.
with all the debt was like $500,000, they're going to own this whole company. They couldn't believe it. The first payment of $225,000 is made. Great. Now, about this time, they have a meeting, a corporate meeting at their home in what's called Havenhurst in Encino, and I get flown out there along with 3 or 4 other, call us, we weren't vice presidents, but we were advisors on the board of directors, different companies that they wanted to acquire. One was a restaurant division, pattern after the Hard Rock, naturally Kramer Guitar. There was a movie picture division. There was a real estate division, and in fact, Frank Harris went out there. We're all out there for a 5-day workshop. They put us up in a hotel, and every day for 5 days we meet in the theater room of the mansion in Encino where Michael was raised. So I knew what was going on, and everything is great. So now the next payment is due. They default. Because at that time in 1993, you had rumblings of child molestation with Michael Jackson.
Right.
The investor backs out.
Wow.
The investor is Pepsi Cola.
Right.
So that's what happened. So that's how the Jacksons got involved with the company. So when they defaulted, the next thing that happens is the company gets converted to what's called a Chapter 7. They have an auction. They auction off the company. I got wiped out.
Right.
I then sued them in court, and the wheels of justice go slow.
Right.
So now, let's say it's by 1997, I finally get a judgment against them of $1.5 million. Well, they basically thumb their nose at me, says you got a judgment against a corporation. There's no money in a corporation. You ain't getting paid.
Right.
Well, I'm pretty persistent, and I prove fraud. And I pierced the corporate veil, which is pretty hard to do.
Right.
And the judge ruled in my favor. The judge says the Jackson family failed to meet the test to own a corporation in the state of New Jersey. The first thing, they failed to capitalize it, meaning they didn't put any money in it. But then they declared dividends, and whatever money came in, they sucked it out for themselves, and a lot of money came in.
Right.
Back then, people were throwing money at the Jackson family. I mean, they set up a deal, and I know all the deals. I mean, I'm part of the company.
Right.
They had a deal in Puerto Rico called, I think it might be called a Chiquita Resort, where they wanted to set up a big resort, and some company gave them $200,000 up front just to use their name. They had another deal in Las Vegas, the Desert Winds Hotel.
Right.
Gave them money there. I mean, all these things failed, but meanwhile, the money came in, and they knew how to spend it.
Right.
So now, after I pierced the corporate veil, I hired an attorney. Now we're already in '89. And the attorney I got, my local attorney was Jim Aaron from the Ansell firm.
Okay.
Great attorney. Really did an incredible job. But now I'm in California trying to collect. So he hooked me up with a collection attorney that we got out of the, I guess, the lawyer's registry or something, which...
Right.
And he agreed to take it on a contingency. I sent him all the papers. And he couldn't serve anybody. I mean, they live behind gates in Encino, and you're never going to get Michael or Janet. So
Right.
what I did, I played a little trick on Frank Harris. I called him up. I said, Frankie, I says, I got to get a hold of Joseph. He said, what for? I said, I want to see if I can settle this. Oh, man, he's mad at you. I said, well, please just tell me how to get a hold of him. I want to see if I can sell it. So he tells me that Joseph is in the home in Las Vegas. He gives me the address. Right away, I shoot it out to the attorney, and he gets somebody dressed up as a delivery man, knock on the door, and serves Joe Jackson.
Right.
So now we got Joe and Mrs. Jackson served. So that's when the fun starts. So
Right.
now I flew out to California, and that's another kind of crazy story, but I don't want to get into that. I flew out to California. We take the deposition of the mother and father,
Right.
and they flat out lied. I mean, they asked Mrs. Jackson if an inventory of her jewelry. She says all her jewelry is costume jewelry. How about your furs? They're fake furs. My son wouldn't want me to wear real furs.
Right.
She claims she had no cars, no bank account, no credit cards. Well, how do you live? Well, we need money. My son gives me money.
Mm-hmm.
So the lawyer says, well, how much are you worth? She said, less than $1,000.
Right.
Okay, now I'm devastated. The lawyer gives me a ride to the hotel where I was staying. I think I stayed at the Western Bonaventure. And this is early in the afternoon. Now it's around 5 o'clock. And, I'm commiserated. I need somebody to talk to. And I had a friend of mine named Mark Nelson, who used to live in Ocean Township, moved to California, and I called him up. And he said, let's have dinner. So we had dinner. I told him what happened. He says, they got money. I said, yeah, I know, but how do I get it? He said, I know a detective. He said, when I get home, I'll call you back. So I believe he gets home, and he calls me back, and he gives me the name of a detective, and that's why I know there's a God up there. I call this number, and I get voicemail. Your call is very important to me, but I'm out of the country. Please call me like next Wednesday.
Right.
Well, I called home that night to my son Henry, and I told him what happened. He says, Pop, he says, we just got this computer. He says, now the internet is just getting popular now. I mean, we're 1999.
Right.
He says, let me look. He says, maybe I can find a detective. So in the morning, he calls me back. He says, I found a detective. Looks like he's on the same street with you. You should call him before you come home. Okay, so call this number, and I get him. The man answers the phone. His name was Frank Kunis, private investigator. He says, you have what? I says, I have personal judgments against the whole family. Really? He says, has it been transferred to California court? I said, yes. Do you have a writ of execution? I said, yes. The next words out of his mouth, I hate the friggin' Jacksons. I said, what? He says, you don't know. You don't know. He says, they screwed a friend of mine. The poor guy lost his house. He said, mister, I do this for nothing if I didn't have to earn a living. He said, but what I need is, you already have a lawyer. I said, he asked me. I said, yes. He says, well, get rid of the lawyer, and I'm going to give you a package deal of 30% of the recovery, and you're going to get me and an attorney that bites and doesn't let go. So I fly home, and then we're in contact. He said, but before I can do anything, I need the approval from your trustee in New Jersey that you got rid of the attorney, but I need a sealed copy of the judgment. Evidently, to have a judgment from one state to be bona fide in another state, it needs a seal from either the court or the state someplace.
Right.
Anyway, so by the time I got this, I now had the transcript from the deposition of the mother and father, and I sent everything to him. A week later, he said, we're going to collect this for you. He said, so I signed a deal with them. Maybe a couple of weeks later, he said, do you get a television show called Inside Edition? I said, yeah. He said, watch it. I said, what for?
Right.
So I think I was in Asbury, and I went over to the Adriatic restaurant, and I persuaded Stanley, the owner, they're watching a baseball game. I said, please put this on.
Right.
So he puts it on, and you see a tow truck taking 2 Rolls Royces out of Mrs. Jackson's garage.
Wow.
And it said, this is to benefit of a New Jersey contractor, Henry Vaccaro, that has a judgment.
Right.
So one thing led to another. Next thing is Frank Kunis couldn't find any hidden bank accounts because there's so many people in California named Jackson. You'd be years tracking them all down. So he created a sting. He set up a bogus company and sent the whole family a $30 refund check. Well, 3 of the family members cashed a check.
Right.
And when you turn it over, on the back is their bank account information.
Oh, wow.
So they got 11,000.
Sneaky.
They got 11,000 out of those accounts.
Wow.
Okay, now he starts to process the Rolls Royce, and he finds an insurance card. Well, Mrs. Jackson said she had no insurance. So my guy subpoenas State Farm Insurance, who refuses to honor the subpoena. Well, the lawyer was tenacious. His name was Steve Fernandez. In fact, the guy's so good, I wish he practiced law in New Jersey. And he went to court, and the judge issued a bench warrant to arrest the president of State Farm of California for failure to honor a federal subpoena.
Wow.
So finally, a week later, he answers the subpoena. We get a file, and in the file, is a copy of a canceled check drawn on Wells Fargo Bank where Mrs. Jackson paid for the insurance from a bank account she said didn't exist.
Right.
Now we know where she banks. Fernandez calls the bank and finds there's 19,000 in the account. Now, when you're broke and you're just coming out of a bankruptcy, 18,000 is like a blood transfusion.
Right.
Man, I can't wait. Right.
Right.
Okay. He goes to the bank the next day. The money's gone.
Wow.
Somebody tipped her off and she closed the account. Fernandez goes back to court with something called an ex parte application, which I believe is like single party. In other words, normally, if I have a lawsuit against you,
Right.
even though you're an attorney, I'd have to notify your attorney to be in court
Right.
with my attorney. Nobody gets notified. We go right into court, and a judge issued a sealed subpoena for the chairman of the board of Wells Fargo Bank to give us Mrs. Jackson's last 2 years of bank statements and canceled checks. Now you know what comes in and where does it go. Each month she's writing a check to a warehouse in Oxnard, California, 65 miles away.
Right.
The detective goes out, locates the warehouse, located the lease, and he gets back to me. He says, I need probable cause. What do you think's in the warehouse? I says, I know. What do you mean you know? I said, wait a minute. Give me time. Well, when I was 5 years earlier at the workshop session in their home, they were doing a private placement with a division that was going to buy or invest in a restaurant chain called Jackson Street. I had the original papers, and in the document it stated that Mr. and Mrs. Jackson owned all the memorabilia, listed what they owned, contrary to what they said on their deposition,
Right.
and that Tito's been collecting it. Well, the lease was in Tito's name, and I've got the private placement. Went to court, got a seizure order, 7 U.S. Marshals raided the warehouse.
Wow.
The rest is history.
Right.
So that's how I got this stuff.
So what's in there?
What's the stuff?
Stuff you would not believe. Okay, well, I got before it comes to my possession.
Right.
They start taking stuff out of the warehouse, gold records, stage costumes.
Inside Edition was busy at this time.
They weren't there then.
Right.
Music instruments and okay. So now the marshal says, "Hey, you got enough stuff out here. Besides, what's in the back looks like it's Michael and Janet's, and since you don't have an executed judgment against them, that stuff stays." Well, I don't care because if I sell it and I sell it for more than a judgment, I can only collect the value of my judgment. They
Right.
get the change.
Right.
Okay. So now my stuff goes to a bonded warehouse where it's inventoried, and my attorney contacts Butterfield and Auction House, and they appraise the stuff that I have at over $2 million.
Right.
Okay, so now my lawyer, who was brilliant, sends the family a letter saying we seized a warehouse full of memorabilia, and we found some, I'm not going to say we found some nasty stuff. Let's
Right.
just call it, quote, nasty stuff. And we don't want to embarrass anybody, and nothing to do with little boys. I
Right.
want that to be clear. I never saw any indication in all the papers, in anything that I seized, that anything to do with little boys.
Right.
But he says we're going to have a public auction. We're going to sell this. We don't want to embarrass anybody. Just pay my client. Instead of paying me, they all file bankruptcy, and I got to give everything back because it happened within 90 days of a bankruptcy. I got to give back 2 Rolls Royces.
Wow.
I got to get back the money that was seized,
Right.
and I got to get back everything. And I'm devastated. From an emotional high, I'm on the floor getting beat up again.
Right.
The next thing, trustees appointed in the bankruptcy, and the trustee, 7 family members filed bankruptcy: Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, Tito, Jermaine, Randy, Reby, Marlon, and Jackie. I don't know if Jackie filed. So they filed, and since the lease was in Tito's name, the trustee took purview over the warehouse in Oxnard and the warehouse at the Mayflower Moving and Storage where my stuff was. So globally, he's got both warehouses. Everything that was originally in his name,
Right.
he now has back to him. Well, there's a lot of infighting, and nobody wanted to claim what was in the seized warehouse because Michael's all these allegations floating around, and in this, what was left behind in his warehouse was a lot of personal belongings of Michael.
Right.
His touring trunk with stage costumes in there, and a lot of other things were in there, file cabinets, and so all this info, nobody would claim it. So now the trustee, his job is to bring money into a debtor's estate.
Right.
But in reality, it's his he looks out for his wallet first, how fast he can bring it in, how much he can collect, and then go for it.
Right.
He found property in Gary, Indiana. He sold. He found property in Las Vegas. He sold. He found property in Alabama. He sold. He got his commission. Now he doesn't want to get involved in a legal hassle of who owns what that's in the warehouse. So he goes to the judge, and the judge signs an abandonment order. In other words, the judge is now going to, or the court is going to abandon both warehouses back to its owner, Tito Jackson,
Right.
provided Tito paid the $60,000 due in back storage where my stuff was taken.
Right.
That included transporting and everything, so they had a lien on it. Would you believe they don't pay the $60,000?
Right.
A month goes by, the trustee goes back to court. Your Honor, what do I do? First time, I believe, in the history of a bankruptcy court, he reversed an abandonment order that's giving him millions of dollars worth of stuff, and he takes it back and he says, sell it. Okay. That same day, that's why there's a God up there, because it couldn't happen without divine intervention, believe
Right.
me. That same day, we never knew that even of the abandonment order, or we would have objected to it. So my lawyer, Steve Fernandez, calls the trustee, what's going on? He says, I have the approval to have an auction. I'm going to sell it. How much do you want? He says, if you give me an offer of $60,000 to cover the warehouse fee, $25,000 for my legal fees, I will recommend a sale. Bam.
Wow.
Fernandez calls me. I said, good, I'll give you a deposit now.
Right.
He says, you can't bid on it. I said, what do you mean? He says, under California law, you're considered an insider. Insiders can't bid. He says, do you know anybody with a corporation that you have no involvement with? Well, I do. I had a friend of mine, Elmer Kendrick, who had a company called Elrich Corp. I had no involvement in it.
Right.
And it's been in business maybe 10 years, but I made a deal with Elmer. I'm going to give him a little piece, and I'm going to pay him back.
Right.
He submits a bid, sends a $5,000 check. It gets accepted, subject to an auction set for the 7th of January, 2002. Okay. The day before the auction, I'm going to fly to California with Elmer. Elmer's in the hospital. His doctor won't let him leave. I said, oh, man, what am I going to do? Well, I was smart enough. I went to an attorney. I went to Jules Rossi in Asbury Park, and he prepared a document making my son-in-law the acting president of Elrich to act on their behalf at this auction.
Right.
Nobody knew my son-in-law, or that Mark Bahari was my son-in-law.
Right.
Got a different last name. So Mark and I fly to L.A. My attorney meets us, and he says, well, wait a minute, Henry, I can't represent Elrich because I represent you. I suggest that Mark hire Mike Kelly. So my son-in-law hires Mike Kelly. Now, Kelly was a genius. The first thing Kelly did is we go to the warehouse that has a $60,000 lien, and we bought it for $40,000 cash. Now, we own the lien. Okay?
Right.
Under California law, the lien perfects the title. If you recall, Paris Hilton left something in a warehouse, and a warehouseman claimed it, and he sold it. Now,
Right.
we own the lien. Excuse me, I need a little drink.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
So you got some legal wrangling going on
Yeah,
out there,
a little bit.
and then it's actually a nice way to short circuit the process, right? Go to the source. I mean, for the warehouse, $60,000.
And bought it for 40.
And bought
Okay.
it for 40,
So
right.
now the next day in court, my son-in-law is in court with Mike Kelly. I'm at a Marriott pacing up and down like my life depends on it. The auction's at 2 o'clock. Get a frantic phone call at 1:45. Henry, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. Mrs. Jackson's here. She's got a bodyguard and a lawyer. I know we're going to lose. Oh, man, calm down, calm down. 10 minutes later, Tito's here. Randy's here. Oh, my God, Michael Jackson's lawyer's here. We're going to lose. Oh, Mark, you're going to give me a heart attack. 20 minutes later, Henry, you won't believe this. Nobody had a certified check. We got everything for $25,000.
Wow.
Now, Michael's lawyer gets up and objects. The judge, and I have the transcript of this, the judge says, young man, your client has no standing in my court. He never filed a third-party proof of claim. He never even reached into his multi-million-dollar wallet to pay $50 to have the security guard open the door. You have no standing in my court.
Wow.
Okay. Now, my son-in-law pays the rest of the money. We get a bill of sale. The bill of sale is no good until the judge signs the order to perfect the bill of sale in
Right.
court. Well, the judge says, under the law, I have 7 days, come back within a 7-day period. Well, we fly home on a cheap, back then it was like $200 on JetBlue, flew back home, and 7 days later, fly back, which is a Wednesday. No order. Oh my God. Meanwhile, what we did is we hired a security guard to stand guard 24 hours a day over the warehouse.
Right.
And 7 days, go back, there's no order. Okay. Thursday, the next day, there's no order. Now I'm really getting paranoid, thinking there's some hometown decision in favor of a superstar against this guy from New Jersey.
Sure.
Friday, there's no order. And I'm really getting worried. But what I didn't know is what the judge knew. The judge knew that Brian Oxman, the family lawyer, was going to file an appeal. Well, right now, Brian Oxman has been disbarred later on. I mean, that's how crooked this character was.
Right.
So he's got this appeal, but you can't put the appeal in until the order's signed because you don't know what you're appealing from.
Sure.
So quarter after, the judge signs the order, 5 minutes to 4 on Friday. 20 minutes later, in comes Brian Oxman. Judge says court's closed. Court's closed normally until Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's why there's a God up there. Monday's a federal holiday. Martin Luther King's birthday. Court's closed until Tuesday. Well, now that I have the signed order and a bill of sale,
Right.
we load 2 65-foot trailers all Friday night.
Wow.
Come Tuesday morning, they're in New Jersey.
Right.
With everything that was in both warehouses,
Right.
including all of Michael's stuff.
Right.
Michael and Janet, right?
Yes, everything in New Jersey in my warehouse. So now we start going through it. It took many months to go through and catalog everything. And what happened was there was an earthquake in Encino a few years earlier, and the family took they had a beautiful wall it was like their trophy wall with all the gold records and everything on this wall. They took them all down and they put them in Tito's warehouse. So that's why they were in there.
Wow.
So now I got them all, and I set up let's call it a safe room, a 5,000 square foot room on the second floor of my warehouse in Asbury Park, and everything displayed, and the word leaked out a little bit. And I get a call from People Magazine. They heard about the collection, and they want to do an exclusive story, a front page story, by the way.
Right.
I says, here's the deal. I'm going to give you the story, but you can't print it until I give you the go-ahead. It might be a month. It might be. They says, okay. So they photographed. They got everything ready. Now, meanwhile, I'm having trouble selling everything I had for what I perceived to be the real value. I mean, I got an offer around $2 million.
Right.
I said, it seems like it's worth a lot more than this. Because I had now all these master recording tapes that were in this second warehouse that I never got the first. I didn't even know what they were.
Right.
So I decided to do a pay-per-view website and give you a virtual tour of my museum. And what I had was the deed to Neverland Ranch. I had all their file cabinets. I had everything.
Right.
I had the lawsuit where Janet and Mrs. Jackson beat up Joe Jackson's girlfriend. I had the settlement agreement where they paid her off. I mean, I had stuff you couldn't believe.
Right.
All their contracts and bank accounts. I had money all over the world. In Japan, I had closed out bank statement with $1 million here, money in for Joe Jackson and Trust of Michael here,
Right.
stuff over there. I had everything. Okay. So we get this set up. We had a professional company come in and do the website, set up all this design for this virtual museum. Okay. Now, assume everything is going to go live Monday. So the deal I made with People is if we're set to go live Monday with the website,
Right.
and People is coming out Monday, and they're going to put my web address on it. I gave an exclusive to Ernie Anastas then he was on Channel 2 News. I gave one to Fox. I gave one to CNN, everybody.
Right.
And the deal was People comes out Monday. Ernie goes live Monday with his exclusive. Tuesday, all you guys can go.
Right.
Okay, everything's set. Now I have a problem. I don't know that you need a merchant bank to take the credit card from the pay-per-view website. I thought you called the credit card company up. So now I keep calling people, and they said, no, you have to have a merchant bank. Well, since I had no credit, I had trouble getting a merchant bank. So now I reach out for Elmer. Elmer took a cruise 2 days earlier on one of these cruises that if you book it tonight and you're on it tomorrow, you save half 50%. So nobody knew where he was.
Right.
He was in Florida, and he takes his cruise to nowhere. We can't find Elmer.
Right.
Now, The problem is, if People is coming out Monday, that means it's being printed on Saturday. So while it's being printed, somebody saw the story and they leaked it to CNN.
Wow.
All over the world, Saturday night is this big warehouse full of memorabilia of Michael Jackson stashed in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Ernie goes live on Channel 2 now because this is the website goes live Monday, and I can't collect penny one. $1.5 million hits at $4.99. I can't collect a penny.
Wow.
By Wednesday, 5 million hits at $4.99, and the bank's broken. Thursday, I got served with a $100 million lawsuit by Michael Jackson
Right.
and a $100 million lawsuit by Janet Jackson, and they closed my website down.
Wow. That's crazy. Right.
Now I really got problems. The cheapest lawyer to defend me was $200,000. Or Mr. Vaccaro, you're in federal court with people with deep pockets.
Right.
We don't take these cases on contingency.
Sure.
I don't have $200,000. Well, I'm smart enough being involved in a lot of lawsuits over the years as a contractor. You must answer the suit, so I answered pro se to stop a default judgment.
Right.
I had some friends at Court TV, and I called them up. I said, "You got to help get me a lawyer." He said, "Well, we'll look around." They tried Gloria Allred, and she turned me down. And maybe a few weeks later, I get a phone call. I'm on a construction job running an excavator, and I get a phone call from a lawyer by the name of Bert Pigg, P-I-G-G, in New Orleans, Louisiana. He says, "Mr. Vaccaro, I understand from Court TV you need my services." I said, "Mr. Pigg, I do. I don't know if I can afford them."
Right.
He says, "You got $5,000. I said, "Yeah." So we have to meet. So now I fly to Louisiana to meet Mr. Pigg. Mr. Pigg has a nighttime job as a law professor at Tulane. I want this as a class project. All the work and research will be done by my students,
Wow.
free of charge, under my supervision. This will cover my filing fees. Mr. Pigg becomes my lawyer.
Right. That's great.
Now, in this time frame,
Does he wear? I picture him in with a bow tie, like Southern. You know. Nice.
I found one of the articles on CNN.
really,
That's funny.
okay. So what happens is he becomes my lawyer, but now Michael gets charged criminally with child molestation by Tom Snedden, the prosecutor from Santa Barbara. I believe.
Right.
Well, which means that the civil trial is put on hold until the criminal goes forward. So now, with everything on hold, nothing happens.
Right.
So for the next 7, 8, 9 months, they have the trial, and at the end of the trial, Michael is found not guilty. And if you recall, he takes off for Bahrain.
Right.
And he takes his 3 little kids with him. And next thing we know is Laveley and Singer, Michael's lawyer, files a motion in court. Now, Laveley and Singer is probably the most prestigious intellectual property attorney in California. And they represent Schwarzenegger, all the big superstars.
Right.
Well, they make a motion to be relieved as counsel for non-payment. Well, Mr. Pigg makes a motion to have the case dismissed. The judge throws the case out with prejudice.
Wow.
Which means, as I sit here today, I'm the only person that can use Michael Jackson's name and web address on the internet.
Right.
And we kept that URL, I guess is what you call it. We kept
Right.
that up to date. So today I still own that.
What's that? What is the URL?
I think it was called JacksonSecretVault.com.
Wow. Right.
So anyway, so the case gets thrown out, and it only cost me $5,000 for Mr. Pigg.
That's insane.
That's insane.
So, I mean, what's life like at that time where you're through a corporate bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, you have a $100 million lawsuit hanging over your head, like, and you're out running an excavator around Jersey somewhere.
New Brunswick.
Like, what's that existence like?
It's kind of rough, but you know.
And you got a warehouse of Michael Jackson.
I always look at the brighter side of life, not the bad side.
Right.
You know, I'm alive. Right now I'm 78 years old. And,
Right.
You know, I'm alive and kicking, and things are good.
So, but I mean, on like that particular day.
Well, it was great when a lawsuit was thrown out.
Sure.
Okay, so now I have this collection, and now I want to sell it and just have a final payday. Well, I went through stuff I wrote a book. The first book, as you recall, is Johnny Cash is a friend of mine.
Right.
The new book, which I'm in the process of doing the audio version now that's not been released yet, is called Michael Jackson is Not a Friend of Mine. Wait a minute.
I like that.
Subtitle, because I never met Michael, but I sure as hell met his lawyer. And it goes through all these machinations that we're talking about now.
Wow.
But some of the next things that happened, I had a friend of mine who's since passed away. His name was Farouk Khan. Incredible, incredible man. This guy was the treasurer of the National Commercial Bank of Saudi Arabia. Listen to this story. He lived in New Jersey. He lived in Flemington. And then when the bank was nationalized, since he's a U.S. citizen, he couldn't work for a foreign government, so he was relieved of his duties. He comes back to the States.
Right.
And he knew everybody and everybody. So he hooked me up through another friend of his, named Chuck Sullivan. Sullivan's family at one time owned the New England Patriots. And because of what Chuck did in his involvement, he sponsored the Jackson Victory Tour, and he went bankrupt, and they put the stadium up as collateral, and the stadium was lost.
Right.
And the team was lost. It was sold to Kraft.
Right.
But it was owned by the Sullivan family.
Right.
So I might be jumping around, but this is funny. So Farouk shows up at my warehouse, which was on the second floor, and he says, I have somebody with me. He says, Chuck, this is Henry Vaccaro. And I said, Chuck, yeah, Chuck Sullivan. I said, wait a minute. I said, I have a letter that I think you wrote. He said, what? Now, I took him inside, and one of the things that I seized out was a letter that Chuck Sullivan wrote to Michael Jackson, unanswered. It says, Dear Michael, I was there when you needed me. I put all the money up in the Victory Tour. I relied on you, and I lost everything because of all your actions and everything else.
Right.
And he said, you're going on a tour of Japan. At least allow me to do the merchandise to recoup some of my money. Never answered. I had that original letter.
Wow.
And this is the Chuck Sullivan that wrote the letter, and I got it.
Wow.
So he had a contact in London. Let's see. I forget this guy's name.
Did you give Chuck the letter?
No.
No.
But he showed me. I had all the Victory Tour, the tour books, and he turned it over. See right there? He says, produced by Charles Sullivan.
Wow.
So that was him.
Right.
That was him.
That's amazing.
I'm sorry, but I got a little cold. So he hooked me up with somebody in London that wanted to buy the collection. So I
Right.
flew to London. I'm sorry, I forget this guy's name right now, but this is another story. He offers me $3 million for the memorabilia and in a 50-50 partnership on the music and the photography. I had all these master tapes, didn't even know what I had at the time.
Right.
And maybe 20,000 photos of the family,
Wow.
including home photos. I had home movies of them,
Right.
you name it. I had it. So we signed a deal with this guy, and he's going to wire me $300,000 within 30 days. So I'm still waiting. Okay? I mean, he had every excuse under the sun. Come to find out, geez, I wish I could recall his name. Anyway, he was sued by Springsteen.
Right.
And he had his own recording studio and his own record distribution. He was bootlegging Springsteen music in Europe. And Bruce sued him and actually went to London and testified.
Right.
And he won a judgment of, I believe, $18 million U.S. against this man. I just
Right.
wish I could recall his name. Anyway. So the guy says, don't worry about it. He says, I stashed my money in the Isle of Man. He filed bankruptcy and stashed his money. He says, that's how you're going to get paid.
Right.
Come to find out a year later, his friend who was holding his money absconded with it.
Wow.
And this guy could do nothing. He'd go to jail for bankruptcy fraud. So that deal fell apart.
Right.
Okay. Next, I get a man named Richard Altamari, who lived in Florida, heard about my collection from my former brother-in-law. This guy had his own jet plane, so we thought, come to find out, he didn't even own it. And he had a company called Universal Express. He flies up here on a charter jet. They land at Wall Airport, comes to my, looks through everything.
Right.
Says, I'll offer you $4 million. Wow. Okay. He says, here's the deal. I'm going to wire you $150,000 tomorrow. We sign an agreement. And then he said, I'm going to start paying you $80,000 a month until the $4 million is paid. And when the $4 million is paid, at that point you turn over all the master recording tapes and the photography. Meanwhile, I want to have an auction and sell off the memorabilia, and
Right.
you're going to get 100% of the auction proceeds. Well, it didn't seem like too
Right.
bad of a decision. So the mistake I made, I never put a UCC lien on the memorabilia. They bring down Guernsey's auction house from New York, picks everything up, and they're going to have an auction at the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas. I forget the date of the auction, but Michael's still alive. Everybody's still alive.
Right.
Fly out to the auction, and the auction brings in around $1 million. Okay. I wait maybe a month and contact Guernsey's. When are you going to have a full accounting so I can get paid? Next thing I know, this guy gets thrown in jail for fraud.
Wow.
Without a trial by the Security Exchange Commission. They warned him, and what he had is this damn penny stock, and he manipulated it and brought a lot of money in and took it out.
Right.
He gets thrown, and unheard of, no trial. They throw him in jail. They put a receiver or trustee to take over his company.
Right.
They liquidated it in one day and claimed as an asset is the money from the auction. So I never saw a penny. Now they're coming after the master recording tapes.
Right.
They never got them, I'll tell you that much.
Right.
Okay. Now, I filed suit against the guy that's in jail.
Right.
Filed suit against Guernsey's. Filed suit against the U.S. trustee. We're going back and forth. The trustee now is getting inquiries from Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson, and they want to bid on his stuff too.
Right.
So the only problem is I got a lawsuit against her. So she says, here's the deal. If you'll give me $30,000, pay me for my fees, my
Right.
legal fees, I will consent that you have good ownership, including the master recording tapes, as long as you give Michael back 10 items of his personal property, which he had listed, and Janet 10 or 12 items of her.
Right.
I consented. Now, listen to what I'm going to tell you. Michael signed off. Janet signed off.
Right.
Now, there's stuff left behind in a warehouse in Las Vegas because when they had the auction, the items that were not sold or that ones that were sold and not paid for are in this warehouse.
Gotcha.
Michael signs off. Janet signs off. 3 days later, Michael Jackson is dead.
Wow.
The value went through the roof.
Right.
Okay. Now I got a sign off signed by Michael Jackson attesting to the fact that I own these tapes. Now, I fly to Las Vegas with my son-in-law and Keith Lowy from Lowy's Moving Service, who's my nephew. And we get out there, and we're met by two attorneys from the Greenberg Trauig law firm,
Right.
then representing the estate of Michael Jackson.
Right.
Dead 3 or 4 days now. They're there waiting to get their items. So we're going through everything. They're in a big storage vault, and as they're brought to me one by one, I'm taking inventory, and 2 hours later, my son said, that's it. I said, what do you mean that's it? I said, there's a couple $100 missing. I said, you know what? I said, I bet they're in Guernsey's warehouse in New York, and they're just commingling, and since we're going there in a couple of days, we'll probably get them there. I said, we know what we have. Let's put it in a warehouse. Put it in a container, and let's get the hell out of here. Michael's lawyer says, you're going nowhere. I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm accusing you of stealing Michael Jackson's property. I said, get the hell out of here. I said, you better have a big gun because I am leaving.
Right.
You're going nowhere. Gets a federal judge on the phone, on a speakerphone. Says, are you Mr. Vaccaro? I said, yes, Your Honor. He says, do you have a lawyer in Las Vegas? I says, no. He said, you better get one. You're going to be in my courtroom at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're being charged criminally with stealing Michael Jackson's property.
Wow.
Oh, my God. Here we go again.
Right.
And I am screaming. Thank God I had a friend of mine who had all this on video because he was going to do a documentary. So he shows up with the big camera, and I've got a mic on me, and
Right.
he hears me cursing back and forth. And then I had a friend of mine. He says, Henry, calm down. He says, look, they threw O.J. Simpson at jail. They don't give a crap about you. And he says, I'm going to take you back to the hotel. He says, I want you to sit in the steam room and calm down. Get a massage. Just relax. He said, they'll handle it.
Right.
So my son-in-law tells these two lawyers, he said, look, we didn't take anything. Now, you're going to stay here because we're going to unpack everything in front of you. So they took 5 hours or so. They unpacked everything. They thought I stuck these papers in different.
Right.
I went through it, and they finally released me to go home.
Right.
2 days later, we go to Guernsey's warehouse where everything was packed in a crate, and we ship it back to Lowy's their warehouse in Neptune, and we start going through it. There's 200 items missing. So I filed a police report with Las Vegas Police Department. Come to find out, I filed it in the wrong place. We were in North Las Vegas, so now I had to go through the whole thing with North Las Vegas.
Right.
Meanwhile, my son Henry goes online and sees that there was an auction, Clark County auction, selling all of my stuff.
Wow.
Well, we couldn't stop it. It was already done, and we were able to recover a few items, but we had the auctioneer arrested. And he says, "You can't arrest me. I have a bill of sale." I says, "I bought it from the warehouseman." He claimed that the trustee never paid the storage, and it's his, and he had the right to sell it. Well, he went in, broke in the vault, and handpicked all the good stuff, sold it for $50,000 cash in a parking lot.
Wow.
Nobody's ever found that guy.
Right.
Never found him. So the arrest turned out to be you couldn't do anything. He bought it what he thought was legally, and
Right.
the guy that should have been arrested was the bum that took off on it. So couldn't do anything.
Right.
So now, this is a crazy story. Okay, so we got a few items back. Maybe 6 months later, my son is on the internet and he sees a company called Heritage Auction House in Dallas, Texas, selling the balance of my stuff.
Right.
So my attorney at the time was Mike Shotland. So his firm contacted the auction house and said, "Hey, if you sell it, we're going to bring you up on charges. It's theft of property. My client owns it." So he did the right thing, Heritage, and what he did is he filed suit against me and the guy that consigned it to him to determine the true owner, which was the right thing to do.
Right.
The only problem is now I've got to fly to Dallas, Texas, got to hire a lawyer, and got to go to court.
Right.
Well, I think the lawyer was like $75,000 or $80,000 by the time you go to court and all this crap, and I could still lose.
Right.
And you got to make a decision. There's stuff that's worth 120. You're going to pay 70 and 5 or 80 to get it, and you can still lose, right? So I did something that I'm proud of. I owed the Internal Revenue Service some money, okay, and I promised to pay them when I sold my Jackson collection. So I went to the head office of the Internal Revenue Service in Dallas, Texas,
Right.
and I said, "I want you to be my lawyer." He says, "Are you crazy?" I said, "The only way I can pay is if I get this stuff back, and it's part of the collection that has more value." The Internal Revenue Service becomes my lawyer. They win the case, and they ship it and send it back to me.
Right.
Okay?
That's insane.
That's beautiful.
You as an attorney appreciate that.
Sure. It's
Okay.
like, it's the second Mr. Pig, right?
Yeah.
Is the IRS.
Wow.
More ways than one.
So, anyway,
That's a creative solution for sure.
you got to do what you got to do.
Right. Are you exhausted with the legal system at this point in your life?
Well, the only thing, the legal system, what I don't like is the wheels of justice. I call it the injustice of the justice system. They
Right.
turn so slow.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, I'm involved in an arbitration now. It's been 3 years and I still don't have a decision. But that's okay.
Right.
You got to expect that. But what I'm sitting on today is worth it. I'm sitting on over 30 16-track master recording tapes of Michael Jackson's unreleased music.
Right.
And
That's insane.
and I don't know if I told you last time or not, but I never owned a copyright.
Right.
Okay, without the copyright, and these songs came from their television shows. In 1976 and 77, they had a variety show called the Jackson Variety Hour, and each show had a different guest host. Everybody from Sonny Bono to Red Fox to Dom DeLuise to Betty White, all the stars of the day, Muhammad Ali, they were all guests on the show. And Joe produced the show. So somebody says, well, the tapes are no good unless you own a copyright. You can't even do anything with them.
Right.
So I went online to the Copyright Office, and it does not go back past 1980. So I got in my car and I drove to Washington. In fact, I went with Frank Harris. He drove me to Washington, and we went through the Copyright Office and found out that Joe Jackson owned a copyright. Okay, another crazy story. So I reach out for Joe Jackson, and he's in Las Vegas, and I said, I want to meet you. I had $20,000 cash with me, flew to Las Vegas, and I said, Joe, I want you to sell me the copyrights for $20,000. He said, you're crazy. I said, Joe, I have the stuff, you have nothing. You might own the copyright. It's no good to you.
Right.
So he said, that ain't enough money. He says, okay, I'm heading back home. As I turn to go, he said, no, let's talk. So I give him $20,000, and he assigns a copyright to me. And he said to me, I want my signature notarized. And I'm looking around. I said, I need it notarized.
Right. Yeah,
So,
totally.
so we get them notarized. Now, if you get something in Las Vegas notarized, it's a big process because of all the scams.
Right.
You have to have photo ID. You have to have a witness. And they take a photo of you. So we had all that done. I get everything signed off, give him the money, and he signs a document assigning his copyrights to me.
Right.
Great. Okay. Now, go down to the copyright office. I transfer it to my name. And I never had the original television shows. I only had the audio portion because Joe took the kids into a studio and they recorded everything with Motown musicians.
Right.
And then when they went on a TV show, they lip synced them. So what I had were all the audios, never the video, or never the complete show.
Right.
So the lady says, well, you know, Mr. Vaccaro, now that you own a copyright, we might have the shows. So she checks on phone. Oh, we have them all here. So for a fee of $800, they downloaded them and digitized them and sent them to me. So now I have all the television shows. So
That's wild.
Right. So what's your plan for all those materials?
selling.
Yeah.
So I hired an agent. I have an agent working now with selling the music and the television shows. So
Right.
we'll see where it goes.
In one of the articles that I quickly pulled up on Google, did you have the tuxedo for Michael's chimp?
No.
No, okay. Because that was like rumored, and I wasn't sure if that was.
If you did, I think that would find a great home here at a shared
Yeah.
universe.
That
No,
would-
I
that would
didn't-
fit.
I didn't have that.
Right next to Pee Wee.
Right. So,
How about his DNA? Have his DNA.
oh yeah, I'm sure it's on.
Oh, they close, yeah.
a lot of letters close. Right. Yeah. That's amazing. So, what was the most interesting thing you found in that collection?
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, we had everything at one time, from his Motown ID card to his first driver's license to
Wow.
fan letters and, you know, boxes and boxes of unopened fan letters. I think the fans think they send letters to these stars. They don't even read them. They're in a big box, unopened.
Right.
So all kind of crazy stuff.
Do you still have memorabilia or just the
No,
masters?
it was all gone.
Yeah.
It
You
was
didn't
all
keep
gone.
anything for yourself.
No, I don't. You know, that's something in the past. I mean, the fact that I have these master recording tapes is really
Right.
where the money is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have my own like weird Michael Jackson involvement. I used to work with an artist named Ryuichi Sakamoto who wrote a song called "Behind the Mask" that Michael Jackson wanted to cover. It was originally one of his original songs, and it was at the time of Thriller. And Michael wanted the song on the record. The only way he would do it was if Michael owned the lion's share. I mean, he's covering a song, but he wanted to own the copyright basically. So I didn't work with him at the time, but my client said no. And then years later, he got a little bit older. He's like, wow, if I let him put that song on the record, Thriller being one of the biggest selling records of all time, like the income alone just in mechanical royalties would have been huge. So after Michael died, oddly enough, Michael's version of that song came out on a record they put out after his death. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, doing business with the Jacksons obviously is difficult.
There's such infighting. I mean, I'm telling you, and the jealousy, incredible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a crazy family documentary in that.
Yeah. Well, what was some of the stuff I found were what had happened was JCI, the company, was going. They set up a concert. It was called the Jackson Family Honors. Mm-hmm. It was originally set up for Atlantic City. The Atlantic City Casino Control Commission gave Jackson Communication a $200,000 advance.
Right.
They had to return the money, and then this show was basically then done in Las Vegas, and they were going to give an award to Elizabeth Taylor and Berry Gordy, I think.
Right.
And Michael refused to perform for his own family.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have all the letters and faxes and emails that Jermaine sent. Jermaine was the president of JCI. Sent to Michael.
Right.
And he said, please, your mother wants to see you. They wouldn't even let any of them in Neverland. The mother couldn't even see him.
Right. That's unbelievable.
Consequently, and then the demands of Janet, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The demands that she put on just to perform for a company that she was a stockholder in. They had to get a special jet plane to fly her and her entire staff
Right.
out to Las Vegas, which included naturally the hairdresser, the makeup people, and all that kind of stuff. She had to have 500 seats for her fan club. They had to have a certain amount of candles on stage. She had to have a certain type of food in a dressing room.
Right.
I mean, this for her own family company that she's a stockholder.
Right. It's almost like dealing with Mike on the MulletCast.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
I'm super needy.
Well, I made you guys give me water and candy.
That's right. You're a cheap date, a cup of bottle of water and some lifesavers.
But I actually had all the correspondence back and forth.
That's amazing. So what happened to all the footage of your friend that was doing the documentary about you?
I still have it, and we're
You're gonna put it
talking
together?
about putting a documentary together about my story. You only heard a little part of it today,
Right.
but it's intriguing.
Yeah.
So we're going to follow the book, and then you got to understand. If I tell you something, I have a document. I mean, I have everything from seizure orders to an arrest. We were an inch away of having what they call a body detachment on Randy Jackson.
Wow.
And he escaped to New Jersey, went to court, and lied in court and told that was not his signature on the subpoena.
That's crazy.
And he had somebody corroborate it, which was his ex-wife that he owed back alimony to.
So you got it all.
Yeah.
So
So you're actively putting that back together. When's the new book? What's your plan for that?
well, I need the final chapter. The final chapter is when I win.
Okay.
The final chapter is when this gets sold.
Right.
And the final chapter is called I Can Now Afford Meatballs with My Spaghetti. Okay? So right now I can't afford the spaghetti.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But that's the final
That's
chapter.
your meatballs.
So, or I can afford a house wine. I mean, I don't have to drink house wine anymore. Something like that, kind of catchy. But
Yeah.
but I've got enough. I've got 38 chapters written,
Wow.
and we're talking to Spotify right now about it.
Okay. That's cool.
That's awesome.
Spotify's actively looking for content, so that could be a very good home.
So, plus the home footage. I mean, we have videos of them at home,
Right.
and I have every document
Wow.
that I'm telling you about.
That's cool. I mean, I'd love to see some of that.
Yeah, that'd be
that'll
pretty cool.
definitely be interesting.
Especially since he's back in the light for that documentary that just came out.
Right. Yeah, there's a new documentary, Finding Neverland.
Yeah.
I just hope that doesn't affect the value of my stuff. But I have music that, look, he was a musical genius. What he did in his private life, I
Right.
can't comment on because I don't know, and
Right.
a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that now he's deceased that all this crap comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's easy to trash somebody when they're 6 feet under.
Sure. Right. That's true. So what do you do on a daily basis? What's your normal day like?
Well, like starting a demolition job tomorrow.
All right. You still operate an excavator?
I
do.
do.
You?
Yeah, I still.
Why do you think you love excavators so much?
I'm Italian.
Yeah. Is that it?
We got to have a machine.
The weird thing in Italy is every time someone digs dirt, the project stops.
Yeah, because
because they unearth like amazing artifacts. So there's a million construction projects all over Italy that
Are on hold.
they begin and they're on hold because we've discovered ancient ruins.
Yeah.
No, but my hobby is I go to World War II battlefield sites.
Do you really?
Yeah, I've been all over. I did a reenactment of the landings on Guadalcanal.
Oh wow.
I climbed Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima and stood where they raised the flag. I
Did you
felt
really?
like I was in heaven.
Wow.
Took another trip to the Philippines. My uncle, Albert Vaccaro, was captured by the Japanese in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
He was captured on Corregidor, and he died after the death march of Bataan. They forced him to march 60 miles with no food and water. And this death camp where he died, I saw it. I took a trip, and I was with 4 survivors. This is 2006. They're all gone now.
Right.
And one of them knew Albert.
Really?
We found where he was captured, and we followed the route of the death march, except we're in an air-conditioned bus.
Right.
And when we got to Camp O'Donnell, I found a giant monument. It said, "To the battling bastards of Bataan, no mother, no father, no Uncle Sam." And on the bottom, Corporal Albert Vaccaro.
Wow.
Felt like my journey was over.
Right. That's really cool.
So, and then, I've been to Normandy and, all those places in Europe, but
Right.
the Pacific is incredible. I mean, what these poor guys, just think of this country. Back in World War II, we fought a 2-ocean war
Right.
in the Atlantic and in the Pacific. And just think of the logistics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I heard about Guadalcanal, I heard about Iwo Jima, but do you know where these places are?
Yeah.
Guadalcanal is down near Australia, and Iwo Jima is 600 miles from Japan. I mean, they're thousands of miles apart.
Right.
And we're fighting all over the Pacific. What was incredible, I was on did you ever hear of Tinian? Mm-hmm. Well, Tinian in World War II was the largest airport in the world. It's an island off of Guam and Saipan, and the Marines captured it. The Seabees came in, and within a couple of months, they've got these 4 airfields built. They even brought their own asphalt plant from the States and made asphalt there.
Right.
I mean, just think of that. I mean,
Right.
you just don't go around a corner, and if you're missing a wrench or a bolt or a can of oil, there's nothing there. It's got
Right.
to all be planned to come to you.
Right.
And they did it.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
And
Yeah.
the Enola Gay left Tinian to bomb Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
The atom bomb was so big that it wouldn't fit under the belly of the plane. They had to dig a pit. The pit is still there, bomb pit number 1. They lowered the bomb in the pit and pushed the B-29 by hand over the pit and jacked it up.
Wow. That's crazy.
Incredible.
Right.
And I've traveled with people that, the tour leader who's now, God bless him, 96-year-old Bob Reynolds, he was an RAF bomber pilot. Okay, the problem was the B-29, they felt wasn't stable enough or strong enough to carry the atom bomb because 3 of them crashed the day before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had rotary Pratt & Whitney engines, and they were not that reliable.
Right.
But the Lancaster had the Rolls-Royce engine in it,
Mm-hmm.
which was incredible, which we later put in the P-51 Mustangs. Very reliable. But they didn't want to have a British plane because of prestige and all that,
Right.
take the bomb. But they
Right.
did use the hook from the Lancaster to hold
Wow.
the atom bomb. So, I mean, you hear
Right.
all this
That
stuff.
is crazy.
So I enjoy that.
Do you have a trip planned
I
coming
do.
up? Where are you going?
Going to follow General Patton's footsteps of the Third Army up to Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
I'm going to take my grandson. I've been there before, but he hasn't.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
How old's your grandson?
18.
Right. That's a nice trip.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
cool.
he's going to learn a lot. God
Yeah,
willing.
for sure. Where do you like to go eat pasta and house wine? Without meatballs?
Without meatballs.
Where's your go-to spot?
Well, I let's see. Where do I go? I spread it around.
Yeah. Do you cook yourself?
No,
Nah.
I boil water,
All right.
and I have a microwave.
So you don't have a family sauce recipe or anything?
No,
That would be
I wish I
in the
did.
book. That would
No.
be cool.
My former wife Diane's a good cook. She
Yeah.
cooks. She's a very good cook, and she feeds me once
Right.
in a while.
So you.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I go to Brennan's restaurant, and I go to Langusta every day because I walk the boardwalk.
Oh, do you?
Still do that. Try in the afternoon. If I'm not working, I walk the boardwalk and stop in there for maybe soup or something on the way home.
Right. That's cool. What are your thoughts about Asbury and where it's going?
Mixed emotions.
Yeah.
I think it's an overkill what they're trying to do, and they're, it's not the Asbury I grew up to. I mean, there still should be some family entertainment on the boardwalk for children.
Right.
You know, either kiddie rides or something. They just don't care. They want the big bucks, and they want to attract who they want to attract.
Right. It is a crazy history, which is, obviously a much longer conversation for another day. But you think about it, at one point there was going to be the Jackson family,
Yes.
Ringling Brothers, and,
Yeah, and these were all signed deals.
Right.
I even have the copies of those contracts.
right. Like you wonder what would
Where
those
would it be?
places be like today
Yeah.
if they were still around there. Right?
And what was incredible about that was there was enough. Petralia was a genius in many ways. It just never came to fruition. But think of this: he was going to call them educational entertainment pavilions,
Right.
which means each pavilion you got educated in as well. If it was Cousteau, you learned about the undersea world, and Cousteau would never allow an aquarium for captured fish. Everything would be, animated or whatever.
Ah, right.
Then you had the one about space, which was also a space camp and an actual replica of the lunar orbit and a spacecraft. All that was in there. And then you had the Jackson Pavilion, which would have had recording studios and everything interactive as well. Okay, and they were going to broadcast TV shows from there as well. So it had an educational component, which meant that in the wintertime, when things were slow, you had school districts from all over the East Coast booked to come in for the educational component.
Right.
And now you had enough mass of people year-round to attract corporate sponsors.
Right.
He had everything set up with corporate sponsors basically paying for everything.
Right.
And it fell apart.
Wow. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, for
It was
sure.
a whole different concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. So aside from excavation, are you still involved in development at all?
I'm working on putting a project together right now.
Yeah. In that.
But it's difficult. No, it's difficult because I don't have the funding that I
Right.
had at one time. I mean,
Right.
back in the day, I'd pick up the phone call. I had, several $1,000,000 of credit at the bank. Which
Right.
account do you want the money in?
Right.
Right now, can I borrow money for a pack of cigarettes? No, you shouldn't be smoking.
That's right.
No, I'm exaggerating, but it's not the same.
Right.
So I have to look for,
But you-
investment partner. But I got an incredible deal I'm working on. I look at the project that the average guy's afraid to tackle because
Right.
they might have a problem, an environmental problem or something like that. But they can be incredibly rewarding. So I'm working on something now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what you did at the Berkeley Carteret probably was a project no one wanted to tackle. So I think a lot of people, you're really the roots of the recent rebirth of what's going on in Asbury
Well, you
Park.
wouldn't. I mean, the way I get treated, you wouldn't think I even
Right.
existed.
Right. But I mean, I don't think people remember, we talked about it on the last episode of the state of affairs in Asbury Park when you took on that project, which, like you said, people thought you were crazy, and maybe you were.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
But maybe I was before my time.
Yeah. Right.
But I had the foresight to do it because Asbury is my hometown.
Right.
I was brought up there, and I have such incredible, incredible memories of my youth. And I mean, even going to Asbury High School, it was just an incredible experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we really appreciate you coming in, sharing little snippets of your story.
Look
I
forward to that
definitely
book.
look forward to the book,
Yeah.
and I hope you do develop, the documentary content more.
I think so.
I think that would be cool. Hopefully, the MulletCast maybe will become part of the documentary.
Never can tell. You never can tell.
Could be and a mullet could be a high point.
But what was incredible and this happened on a World War II cruise I took, which was incredible. In 2003, there was a cruise that left Pearl Harbor, and we went to all the battlefield sites. It was on a Regal Princess, and we first went to Midway Island, which was the first naval victory. We got off on the little shuttle boats took it because there's no dock there.
Right.
Come back, and then we went cruise south, across the equator, went to Guadalcanal, the Marshall Islands, the Solomon Islands, and we headed north, went to Guam, Tinian, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and Hiroshima. An incredible trip. Wow. 700 passengers and 200 World War II veterans going to the battles for the last time. It was so moving. And on a ship, I meet a guy that's doing a documentary on the lives of some of these guys, and we got to be friends. And he now lives in Salt Lake City, Utah,
Right.
but his in-laws are from New Jersey. And when I told him my story, thank God he came back to visit them over Christmas and went to my warehouse and videoed everything and my story and everything on high quality, high definition tape.
Oh, cool.
And then he's the same guy that went to Las Vegas when I got in a battle
Oh, really?
with the lawyers. So
Right.
we have all that footage.
That's cool.
So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's there's almost like, I don't want to simplify your life, but you have two themes. One is, I notice you say a lot of people are a friend of yours, right? So you've built a lot of friendships, and you've had a lot of unique friendships and relationships, and then but at the same time, you've also been embroiled in a lot of disputes with some people, and wound your way through the legal system of
but you
standing up for things sometimes.
I do. I stand.
Right.
I remember my father. He says, if you believe you're right, you go ahead.
Right.
Okay? And you got to understand, when you file a lawsuit against somebody, some people take it personal. I don't. I mean, it's business.
Right.
Like even with the Jacksons, I don't want their money.
Right.
I just want my money that they had.
Right.
So you have to look at it like that.
Yeah.
And, if not, you go crazy. And you
Right.
can't hold, grudges.
Nah. I mean, you survived a lot. Like, we were talking about before, embroiled in those bankruptcies and with a $100 million lawsuit hanging over your head, a lot of people would have folded up at that point.
Well,
But
look at Walt Disney. He went bankrupt 3 or 4 times.
Right.
And he
Right.
came out the better for it because you have to learn.
It's true.
And, even Donald Trump, I mean,
was
he
just
didn't
gonna say.
personally go
Right.
bankrupt, but his casinos did.
4 times,
But
yeah.
but so what? I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of doing business. I
Right.
mean, look what happened to him in the economy. Anybody who was in a real estate business in the 90s really took a tumble.
Sure.
He survived.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? He
Right.
survived it.
Right.
So, you got to give the guy all the kudos in the world. If you
Right.
don't, whether you like his politics or not, he's a survivor.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people
I
don't.
wish I survived,
Right.
but I'm a survivor now because I'm talking to you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
how I look at it. I mean,
Right.
the one thing Johnny Cash told me, he says, Henry, the only thing that went bankrupt was your wallet. Think of it. He says, your heart is still pumping and your mind is still thinking. He says, you'll be back.
Those are wise words.
Yeah.
That's my outlook.
It's a good way to.
And that man was always there for me. I mean, in many ways, he was so shy. He was shy.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't, but just imagine on a fishing boat with this guy and two of you are sitting and you're just talking for hours on end. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't get any better than that.
That's
like
right.
Chris Christopherson, he said, can you imagine? He said, a fan becomes the closest friends with the biggest superstar in the world, your idol, and he says it don't get any better than that.
No,
Sure.
That's true. It's almost unbelievable.
So, I have great experiences with Johnny Cash. I mean, man, a lot. I mean, fishing with him in the Bahamas, and then when he had a roast in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm a roaster, and I'm on the dice with who's who in country music. Come on, man. I
Right.
mean, and most of these people still know me. I mean, Christopherson knows me, and
Right.
I knew Waylon, God rest his soul. I know Willie, and Hank Williams Jr. I met him, and we got talking about. He wanted to go on one of my World War II trips with me. He said, "Next time you're going, call me up."
That would be cool.
That's awesome.
Right.
So I mean, they're regular people. Marty Stewart's a close friend of mine.
Right.
Richie Sambora still is. I'm not friendly with John Bon Jovi, but that's another story.
Yeah. I wish Richie was back in Bon Jovi.
Yeah,
He's a great guitarist.
Great guitarist.
For sure. All right, Henry, I appreciate you coming in again with us. Once again, check out Henry's book, Johnny Cash is a Friend of Mine, online. We're going to be looking out for your new book. Michael Jackson is
Not a friend.
not a friend of mine. And I look forward to actually how the last chapter is written, because
Well,
I want you to get those meatballs.
I need 'em. I need
And
'em.
we'll see what happens with those master tapes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Henry. We
Great.
appreciate you.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
Once again, my name's Evan Balmer. Check me out on Instagram at Evan Balmer.
Mike Mercia at mortgageguy_Mike, and you can check out the MulletCast and this podcast at the MulletCast on Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you.